Why was everyone laughing at her? Emma adjusted the strap of her equipment bag, trying not to let her face reveal what she felt. The desert sun at Fort Dawson was already climbing high, casting sharp light across the rifle range. Recruits were buzzing like restless bees, comparing weapons, scopes, and expensive gear gleaming like jewelry in the morning light. It should have been just another training day. Yet all eyes had turned to her. Not for her shooting, not yet. For the scope she carried. It was old, rusted brass fittings, a leather grip worn smooth by decades of use. Its age showed like scars across its body, scratches, faded metal, a patina green as if the years themselves had corroded it. "That rust bucket still works," one of the recruits jeered, his voice cutting across the range. Tyler Brooks, son of a colonel, owner of a rifle scope that cost more than Emma's entire training allowance. He laughed hard and others followed. Emma lowered her gaze, though her grip on the case tightened. She had known this moment would come. On the bus ride here, she told herself not to care, to let them laugh. But the sting of humiliation still landed sharper than she'd prepared for. It wasn't just a scope to her. It was her grandfather. The man who had raised her in the backwoods of Montana, who had taught her how to read wind the way others read newspapers, who had placed that very scope into her hands when she was 12 years old and whispered, "This will teach you to see what others miss." But how could she explain that to them? Recruits from wealthy families, raised in private shooting academies, boasting of high-tech optics with digital displays. They would never understand. To them, her battered spotting scope was a relic, a museum piece at best, a joke at worst. Rachel Martinez, polished and sympathetic, shook her head. "Girl, you need to get yourself real equipment if you want to survive this program." Her tone wasn't cruel, just certain. As though the truth was obvious, modern problems demanded modern tools. Emma kept her mouth shut. Words wouldn't help her here. "Hey," came a quieter voice beside her. Michael, analytical, careful, the kind of recruit who measured his words like he measured wind speed. He glanced at her scope, then back at his own bag brimming with tech. "If you want, you can borrow one of mine. I've got backups." The kindness caught her off guard. Yet beneath it was a misunderstanding. He thought she carried that scope because she had no choice, because she couldn't afford anything better. He didn't understand it wasn't poverty that kept it in her hands. It was trust. It was history. Emma forced a small smile. "Thanks, but I'll stick with what I know." Studied her, skeptical but polite. He didn't argue. At the front of the line, Sergeant barked orders, laying out the day's evaluation. His voice carried the weight of decades. A man who had shaped civilians into soldiers for longer than some recruits had been alive. "One thing matters out here," he said, eyes scanning them like they were pieces of gear to be inspected. "A rifle that works and a soldier who knows how to use it. That's it." His words lodged in Emma's chest like an anchor. She remembered her grandfather saying almost the same thing on the porch back home, with Montana wind whistling through the pines. It's never the tool, it's the hand that knows it. Pairs were assigned. Emma found herself with. She caught the faintest hesitation in his eyes when she laid the scope down beside her mat. He wanted to trust her but didn't. Not yet. The first rounds cracked across the range, sharp rifle reports echoing against dry hills. At 200 meters, targets fell with rhythmic clangs. Recruits with digital readouts called out precise numbers. Temperature, humidity, wind drift measured to decimal places. Emma lowered herself behind her grandfather's scope. The familiar weight pressed against her cheekbone. Through its worn glass, the world wasn't digitized. It was raw. She saw the shimmer of heat waves rising from desert sand. She saw blades of grass bending just slightly more on the left than the right. She saw dust twisting in a pattern that spoke of crosswinds. Her lips parted. "Winds coming from your 3 o'clock, 7 miles an hour, gusts stronger, aim a touch high." Frowned, "That scope doesn't have sensors. How?" He cut himself off, adjusted, fired. The bullet rang against steel, slightly left of center. His eyes widened, surprise, confusion, a reluctant respect. "Your call was right," he admitted. "I didn't trust it fully, that's on me." Emma said nothing. The whisper of pride she felt she buried. Distance increased. 400 meters. 600. Mirage thickened, bending air like water. Some recruits with cutting-edge scopes missed completely, their technology blinding them more than it helped. Numbers weren't enough when the air itself shifted like a living thing. When Emma's turn came to shoot, fed her digital readings. Atmospheric pressure, precise wind, computer-recommended adjustments. She followed them, fired, missed the center by inches. "That didn't feel right," she murmured. Blinked, "The data's solid, it should have." She ignored him. Shifted, breath, let the scope teach her, watched the dust, the mirage, the grass. Fired again. Perfect center. The clang carried across the range and silence followed. Even laughter had stopped now. Turned toward her. "How did you?" "Sometimes the numbers tell you what's happening now," she said, working the bolt with calm precision. "But the wind doesn't care about now. It's already changing. You have to feel where it will be when the bullet gets there." He looked at her differently then, not like a recruit with broken gear, but like someone who saw things he couldn't. And yet before Emma could process his shift, a shadow fell over her. Captain Richardson. A man with lines carved into his face like stone cliffs, eyes sharp, scar from temple to jaw, a name whispered across Fort Dawson with the weight of legend, former SEAL, combat veteran, the kind of man recruits feared disappointing. He said evenly, clipboard under one arm, "Walk me through your decision to disregard your spotter's call." Emma rose to attention. This was it, her chance, her career balanced on words. "Sir," she began, steady despite the hammer of her pulse, "the instruments were correct for this moment, but I could see the patterns shifting. My grandfather taught me it's about predicting, not just measuring. Shooting is about where the bullet will be, not just where it should be." Silence stretched. Richardson wrote something down. His expression gave nothing away. Then his gaze drifted toward the scope. He bent, lifted it. And the world shifted. For the first time, his hand trembled. Numbers etched into the rim, small, faded, almost hidden. Asterisk 290, 7M Golf, 1991. His face drained of color. He lowered the scope slowly like it was made of glass. His voice was different now. Quiet, shaken. "Where did you get this?" Emma's throat tightened. She hadn't expected this, not from him. "My grandfather, sir, Joseph, he gave it to me." Richardson stared, searching her face as if confirming something impossible. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Stillwater." Emma frowned, "Sir." But he said nothing, only handed the scope back with careful reverence. His eyes met hers, heavy with something she couldn't name. 1400 hours, my office, bring the scope." Then he walked away. And Emma was left standing in the desert, rifle cooling on the mat, scope warm in her hand, heart racing. She had no idea what he'd seen, or why her grandfather's name, Joseph, suddenly carried the weight of a secret. But she felt it. The shift. The crack in the world she thought she knew. Because for the first time, Emma realized her grandfather hadn't told her everything. Not by far. And maybe, just maybe, that rusted scope wasn't just a family heirloom. Maybe it was a key. Why did Captain Richardson look at her like that? Emma sat rigid in her chair, the clock on the wall ticking louder than it should. She had reported to his office on time, her grandfather's spotting scope tucked carefully into its leather case. Now, minutes later, the silence felt heavier than armor. Richardson leaned back in his chair, face unreadable, fingers steepled under his chin. His eyes flicked between the case and her, measuring, calculating. "You said this belonged to your grandfather," he said at last. "Yes, sir," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the pulse pounding in her ears. "Joseph." Richardson inhaled slowly as though steadying himself. Then, with deliberate care, he opened the case, lifting the scope once more into the light. His hands, steady in firefights, steady in storms, trembled again. "Do you have any idea what this is?" Emma frowned. "It's just his old scope. He taught me with it, that's all." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Just his old scope." He turned it, exposing the inscription to the lamp on his desk. Asterisk 297 M Golf 1991. His voice dropped. "That number isn't random. It marks a shot, a distance, a record." Her breath caught. "A record." "Your grandfather," Richardson continued, "wasn't logistics, wasn't just some support guy. He was a sniper, not just any sniper. Joseph was," he trailed off, almost unwilling to say it. Then the word left him like a confession. "Stillwater." Emma's brow furrowed. "Stillwater, I don't." "You wouldn't," Richardson cut in. "Most people never heard the name, that's how he wanted it, but for those who knew, Stillwater was a ghost story, a man with an eye so precise it seemed unnatural. That inscription, Gulf War 1991, a shot that saved an entire squad of Marines, classified, buried, but it happened. I know because I was there." Emma's mind reeled. Her grandfather, the quiet man who fished trout with her at dawn, who baked pies, who told her bedtime stories about nothing more dangerous than getting lost in a storm. That man, a legend. It felt impossible, yet the way Richardson's voice trembled with reverence left no room for doubt. She forced words out, dry against her tongue. "He never told me." "Of course he didn't," Richardson said. His gaze softened, though it still burned with memory. "Men like him rarely do. True legends don't brag, they carry their ghosts in silence." He placed the scope down carefully, almost reverently. "Colonel Hayes will want to speak with you." The name struck something faintly familiar. Hayes. Her grandfather had mentioned it once, maybe twice, in passing, but never explained. Richardson's eyes locked on hers. "Until then, guard that scope, and guard your mouth. The less people know, the better, understood." Emma swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Dismissed. She stood, saluted, and left. Outside, the afternoon sun had lost its bite, but Emma felt hotter than ever. The whispers of the other recruits followed her as she crossed the yard. They no longer mocked her. No one dared, but silence carried its own weight. Their eyes lingered longer now, as though they knew something had shifted, as though they sensed she wasn't just another recruit anymore. And maybe she was. That night she sat alone in the barracks, her roommates long asleep, staring at the old scope in her lap. Her fingers traced the engraved numbers, over and over, as if the truth might seep through her skin. Stillwater. The name echoed like a riddle. She remembered her grandfather teaching her to wait before shooting, to breathe, to listen, to read not just what was, but what would be. She remembered the quiet pride in his eyes when she landed her first shot at 600 yards. The way he nodded, slow and sure, as if confirming something he already knew. Had he been preparing her all along? The thought twisted in her chest. Pride, fear, confusion. She didn't know which to feel. But then, curiosity got the better of her. Her thumb brushed against the eyepiece. Something about the cap felt strange. She twisted. It gave way with a soft click she had never heard before. Inside, folded tight, was a yellowed piece of paper. Her heart pounded as she pulled it free. Her grandfather's handwriting. "Emma." She froze, breath catching in her throat. "If you're reading this, it means someone has recognized what the scope represents, and you've learned the truth about me." Her eyes blurred with sudden tears. She blinked hard, forcing herself to read. "I never wanted to burden you with the shadows of war, but I recognized in you what my commander once called the eye, the gift that can't be taught. Every hour I spent with you, Every lesson on wind and mirage, every walk in the woods, it was preparation. A path you might one day choose to walk. Emma's throat tightened. She had always thought those days were just love, family, a grandfather teaching a girl to hunt, but they had been something more. You will be given a choice. Whatever you decide, I am proud of you. The scope is yours, it's your legacy now. Trust the whisper of the wind, not the numbers on a screen. It ended simply. With love and faith. Your grandfather. Stillwater. Emma pressed the paper to her chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks, hot against cool night air. For so long she had thought she was alone, ordinary, a recruit scraping by among privileged heirs with gleaming weapons. Now, she realized her grandfather had seen her differently all along, not as ordinary, but as heir to something hidden, something heavy. And now she couldn't know it. The next day at 1600 hours sharp, she was ushered once again into Captain Richardson's office. But this time, he wasn't alone. A man already sat across from his desk. Silver-haired, lines cut deep into his face, his uniform crisp, his bearing heavy with authority. His very presence made the air taut. Colonel's eagle insignia gleamed on his chest. "Recruit," Richardson said formally, "this is Colonel Hayes." The name hit harder this time. Recognition stirred. Her grandfather had spoken it rarely, always with respect, always with finality. Emma snapped to attention. "Sir." "At ease," Hayes said, his voice gravel but steady. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as though peering straight through her. "You brought the scope." "Yes, sir." She offered the case with both hands. Hayes accepted it with care, not curiosity, reverence. He studied the worn brass, the patina, the inscription. His thumb traced the numbers like they were scripture. "Joseph," Hayes said, "not a question, a statement." "Yes, sir, my grandfather." The colonel's eyes softened, but his jaw tightened. "Also known as Stillwater." The name again, carried like a secret. Hayes glanced at Richardson. A look passed between them, one Emma couldn't interpret, a look of shared memory, of ghosts. Finally Hayes looked back at her. "Your grandfather was one of the finest snipers this country ever produced. The record marked here, it isn't in the books, classified, but it's real, and I was there when it happened." Emma's breath hitched. Hayes continued, voice low, deliberate. "He asked me for one thing before he died, to watch for you, to see if you carried what he called the eye. Yesterday I saw it, and today I see it again." Emma's heart raced. His words pressed like weights against her chest. "What does that mean, sir?" Hayes leaned back. "It means you have a choice. There is a program, unofficial, classified, known only to a few, Prairie Fire. It develops operators whose skills can't be taught in standard training. Your grandfather helped build it. He was its cornerstone. And now I'm offering you a place." Emma froze. The room seemed smaller, the air thinner. Prairie Fire, a path her grandfather had walked, a path hidden from the world. "You have 24 hours, Hayes said. Say yes and you'll be transferred immediately. Say no and this conversation never happened. Either way, the scope is yours. It belongs with you now." He handed it back. Emma clutched the leather case, pulse thundering in her ears. She had come to Fort Dawson a nobody, a recruit mocked for a rusted scope. Now she sat across from a colonel who spoke of legacies, of secrets, of programs buried deeper than history. And for the first time in her life, Emma realized the path ahead wasn't just about becoming a soldier. It was about becoming her grandfather's heir. But was she strong enough? Or would the weight of Stillwater's ghost crush her before she even began? Why was the facility so quiet? The transport van rumbled up the winding mountain road, its windows tinted, its markings scrubbed bare. No insignia, no numbers, just blank government steel. For hours, Emma had sat in silence beside Captain Richardson, the spotting scope resting against her knee inside its case. every turn of the road pulling her farther from the world she had known. When the vehicle stopped, dawn was breaking over the Appalachians. The air was crisp, clean, filled with pine and damp earth. Before them stretched a cluster of low concrete buildings, gray and unremarkable, hidden among the trees. No signs, no flags, no names. "This is where we part ways," Richardson said, stepping out. His tone was steady, but his eyes carried something else, something she couldn't name. "From here on, you answer to Colonel Hayes. Remember what I told you. Trust your instincts, but don't stop learning. The people inside these fences, they've forgotten more about long-range shooting than most soldiers ever know." Emma nodded, clutching the strap of her bag. She wanted to ask him questions about her grandfather, about prairie fire, about what came next, but Richardson was already turning back toward the vehicle. His presence faded as quickly as it had entered her life. And then she was alone. Two guards flanked the gate. Their uniforms bore no identifying marks, only muted American flags stitched to their shoulders. Their weapons weren't standard-issue rifles. These were customized, sleek, with long optics and reinforced stocks. Their eyes tracked Emma carefully as she approached, her clearance papers trembling slightly in her hands. One guard checked her documents, the other checked her expression. Finally, a nod. The gate buzzed open. Inside, the facility opened into ranges stretching far into the mountains, obstacle courses coiled with rope and steel, barracks low and square against the tree line. Everything looked plain, yet Emma sensed it was. This place wasn't built for show. It was built for purpose. The main building loomed ahead. Its door opened before she touched it. Colonel Hayes stepped out, his silver hair catching the morning light. At his side stood another man, lean, weathered, older than Hayes, with pale blue eyes that studied Emma as though reading her file without a word. Hayes said, his voice calm but commanding, "Good to see you made it." He gestured to the man. "This is Master Sergeant Frank. He'll be your primary instructor here." Extended his hand. Emma shook it, her palm swallowed by his calloused grip. His touch was firm but not crushing, his stare sharp but not unkind. "Stillwater's granddaughter," said, his voice carrying the weight of memory. "Your grandfather saved my life twice in the Gulf, once with that scope you're carrying, once with a warning about a sandstorm that would killed me. I owe him more than I can say." Emma's throat tightened. To hear someone else speak of her grandfather like that, not as a gentle man in Montana, but as a soldier, a savior, unsettled her in ways she hadn't prepared for. "It's an honor, sir," she managed, though her voice wavered. "I didn't know, he never told me any of that." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Joe always did have a gift for understatement. He gestured toward the doorway. "Come inside, the others are waiting." "The others?" Emma followed him into a conference room where 4 soldiers sat around a wide table. They all turned as she entered. Their eyes carried curiosity, skepticism, and something sharper, the kind of intensity that only came from competition. Hayes made introductions briskly. "Staff Sergeant Jackson, Force Recon, 3 tour in Afghanistan." A tall, muscular man with dark cropped hair. His stare was unblinking, his expression flat. "Lieutenant Maria, Navy Special Warfare." A woman with sharp features, posture perfect, eyes like steel behind calm professionalism. "Sergeant Wells, 10th Mountain Division, high-altitude experience." He gave a short nod, his face hard to read. "And Lieutenant Michael, you already know him." Emma blinked, sat at the far side, smiling faintly. His presence here was unexpected, yet oddly reassuring. "They recruited me the day after our evaluation," he explained. "Said my analytical skills complement the program." The room's tension shifted, familiar ground but not safe. Leaned forward, his eyes drilling into Emma. "So, Stillwater's granddaughter." His tone was neutral, but his meaning was. Emma held his stare. "I'm here to qualify, just like everyone else." Cut in, voice even but firm. "Legacies are earned, not inherited. will prove herself the same as any of you. His gaze moved across the table. Now let's get to business. Hayes took the floor, tapping a screen that lit up with topographic maps of unfamiliar terrain. Prairie fire exists for one purpose: to develop marksmen capable of achieving what others consider impossible. Modern battlefields evolve. Our enemies adapt. Technology can be jammed, intercepted, or fooled. But instinct, skill, and human judgment, those remain unbreakable. His eyes swept over them all. Each of you was chosen because you carry something rare: the hunter's eye, a neurological capability partially inherited, partially trained, that lets you process environmental data in ways ordinary soldiers can't. You don't just see, you predict. Emma's chest tightened. She remembered her grandfather's note: the eye, the gift that can't be taught. Hayes clicked again. Brain scans filled the screen, areas lit in bright colors. Research proves it now. Same as perfect pitch in music, same as prodigies in chess. Some of you process wind, mirage, and motion like language. Joseph Stillwater was one of the first. His methods shaped this program. And now, his gaze rested on Emma. One of his own sits among you. Silence. Jaw flexed, leaned back, studying Emma carefully. Wells stared at the table, gave her a small, almost encouraging nod. Hayes concluded, "Your training begins tomorrow at 0500, dismissed." The recruits rose, yet lingered, stepping close to Emma as the others filed out. His voice was low, meant for her alone. "Must be nice," he muttered, "getting here because of bloodline." Emma met his stare, her voice steady. "I didn't know about my grandfather until weeks ago. I'm here for the same reason you are, because I qualify." Thin smile cut like a knife. "We'll see." Before Emma could respond, Lieutenant appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Back off." He brushed past her without another word. Turned to Emma, her tone softer. "Don't mind him. He's been here longer, thinks that makes him special. He's a good shooter but competitive to the bone. Just watch your back." Emma nodded, grateful. That night in the barracks room she now shared with, Emma unpacked her few belongings. At the bottom of her bag, wrapped in cloth, lay the spotting scope. She touched it gently, feeling again the weight of its history. But it wasn't just the scope anymore. It was expectation. It was scrutiny. And it was a legacy she hadn't chosen, but couldn't walk away from now. The following morning, before dawn, the recruits were driven to the mountain ranges. The cold bit into Emma's cheeks, sharp and bracing. His voice cut the air. "Today is diagnostic. We establish baseline capabilities. Each of you will fire from 600 meters out to 1500. Standard ammunition, standard rifles. Targets are steel, 3 shots each. Let's see what you've got." Emma's pulse quickened. This was no longer training among equals. This was prairie fire. She set her rifle on the mat, carefully unwrapped the scope and placed it beside her. 2 stations down, chuckled just loud enough. "Bringing antiques to a modern gunfight. Good luck." Emma ignored him. Assigned as her spotter for the day, leaned closer. "Don't let him get in your head, just shoot." Emma nodded, settling in behind the rifle. The first round cracked downrange at 600 meters. The clang of steel answered. Emma's chest rose and fell with slow, measured breaths. This wasn't just a test. It was her beginning. And maybe her grandfather's echo. How far could a bullet really travel? The question lingered as Emma settled behind her rifle at the mountain range. The sun had just broken the horizon, light slanting across dew-coated grass, wind cutting sharp between the trees. 600 meters had already proven easy. Her shot rang true, steel answering with a clean, satisfying clang. But now the targets stretched farther: 800, 1200, 1500. Distances where even perfect rifles bent under the laws of physics, where mirage and wind and curvature conspired against precision. His voice carried across the line. Remember, these aren't just shots, they're mirrors. They'll show you who you are and what you're not. Watch carefully. Went first. His movements were crisp, practiced. At 800 meters, he struck true on the second shot. At 1200, his groupings widened but still sang. At 1500, his third shot fell short but close enough to earn a approving nod. Rose, jaw tight with pride, eyes darting to Emma. The challenge was clear, beat that. Next came calm, steady, her breathing almost meditative. Each pull of the trigger was deliberate, unhurried. At 1200, she missed her first shot, adjusted, then landed the next two clean. At 1500, she struck once. That was all she needed. His turn was different. He leaned into numbers, whispering calculations to himself, adjusting with surgical precision. His shots landed, though not as clean as. Still, his method showed logic over instinct. Then Emma's name was called. She lowered herself onto the mat, fingers brushing the cold metal of her rifle, the familiar weight of her grandfather's scope beside it. She closed her eyes for a moment. Breathed. Trust the whisper of the wind, she reminded herself. Crouched beside her, acting as spotter. Wind 5 knots from your 9, temp stable, mirage thick past 1000. She nodded, peered through the scope and fired. The first shot struck true at 800 meters. At 1200, her second round skimmed the target's edge, ringing metal by the thinnest margin. She adjusted, pulled again. Dead center. Grinned, you've got it. But then came 1500. Emma aligned, breathed, fired. The bullet fell short. Dust kicked up just below the target. Frowned, wind shifted, hold higher. She tried again, missed again. The silence behind her was heavier this time. Chuckle cut the air like a blade. One-trick pony, he muttered. Emma's jaw tightened. She ignored him, focused, adjusted again. Third shot. The round missed wide. The silence turned absolute. She lowered her rifle slowly, her pulse hammering. Failure tasted bitter in her mouth. Approached, his boots crunching against gravel. He crouched beside her mat, his voice low, carrying for her ears alone. Do you know what went wrong? Emma swallowed. I misread the wind. Shook his head. No, you listened to it wrong, you let it shout. You need to hear the whisper beneath the noise. She frowned, the whisper. He tapped the spotting scope. Your grandfather understood it. Stillwater could read beyond the obvious. Mirage and gusts will lie to you, but the earth itself won't. Dust, branches, insects in flight. The things no sensor can measure, that's the whisper. You'll learn it or you won't last here. Emma looked at him, frustration battling with shame. How do I hear it? His eyes softened. By failing again and again, until your failure teaches you what no book can. He stood, addressing the group now. Training will strip you down to nothing. Prairie Fire doesn't care where you came from, who your family was, or what your record says. We only care if you can see what others miss. Today, saw less than she needed. Tomorrow, we'll see if she learns. Smirked openly as they packed up, gave Emma a nod of quiet encouragement, though lingered. You were close, he murmured as they walked back to the barracks. Your call was almost perfect. Maybe's right, it's not about more data, it's about something else, something I can't measure. Emma forced a thin smile, but inside her chest burned. Failure. She had come here to honor her grandfather's name, and in front of everyone she had fallen short. That night she lay awake in the dark barracks, steady breathing the only sound. She turned the scope over in her hands, tracing the inscription. 297 M Golf 1991. Her grandfather had made the impossible shot, at distances where she had failed. Hell. She closed her eyes, replaying words. Listen for the whisper beneath the noise. She thought of Montana wines, of her grandfather teaching her to watch tree branches before leaves, of how he told her not to chase gusts, but to trust the drift of dust in sunlight. Maybe was right. Maybe she had been listening to the wrong things. The next morning the training intensified. Moving targets, shifting winds, elevation changes that tricked even into a miss, hovered like a shadow, watching, never praising, never condemning. When Emma fired, she adjusted less, trusted more. At 900 meters she missed once, then landed. At 1100 she felt the pattern before spoke. The shot struck true. At 1300 she listened harder, not to the roar of the wind but to the faintest tilt of grass at the edge of her vision. She squeezed. The steel sang. Exhaled. You didn't even wait for my call. Emma's lips curved faintly, didn't need it. But she knew she wasn't there yet. The 1500-meter target still loomed. When her turn came again, Emma breathed deeply, settling her cheek to the rifle stock. She studied the mirage, then ignored it. She studied the gusts, then pushed them aside. Instead, she watched dust swirling in the valley, a pattern subtle, steady. She adjusted 2 clicks high, half right. Pulled. The target clanged. Silence followed. Then's voice cut through, calm, low, almost proud. That's the whisper. For the first time since arriving at Prairie Fire, Emma felt something shift, not just in her shooting, in herself. She wasn't there to carry her grandfather's shadow anymore. She was there to find her own. Why did her legs feel like lead? Emma staggered under the weight of her pack, boots sinking into mud that clung like tar. The Appalachian rain hadn't stopped in 3 days, turning the training course into a battlefield of water, stone, and exhaustion. She forced herself to keep moving, shoulders screaming under the load of her rifle, rations, and gear. They had been marched nearly 30 miles through mountain trails, steep ridges, and swollen streams. Sleep was rationed in minutes. Food came cold and tasteless, swallowed only to survive. His voice followed them everywhere, barking orders, setting pace, never easing. This is Prairie Fire, he'd said on the first day of field exercises. Not the range, not controlled conditions. Out here, the mountain doesn't care how much money your rifle cost. It doesn't care about your rank, your record, or your pride. Out here, either you last or you don't. Jackson thrived. He carried his pack like it was nothing, muscles chiseled and ready for punishment. Every chance he got, he looked back at Emma with a smirk, the unspoken challenge clear. You don't belong here. Maria endured with quiet discipline, her movements efficient, conserving energy where others wasted it. Wells was steady, if slower, his mountain training serving him well. Struggled physically, but compensated with planning, always the first to suggest adjustments that kept the group moving. Emma. She fought every step. The weight, the mud, the sleep deprivation, it dragged her down, whispered failure into her ears. By nightfall, when they huddled under thin tarps, she lay staring at the canvas above her, rain hammering down, her body trembling with fatigue. She thought of her grandfather, thought of his words, trust the whisper of the wind, but wind couldn't lift this pack. Wind couldn't soothe the ache in her knees. She closed her eyes, fighting tears she refused to let fall where the others might see. By the 5th day, called for a halt in a narrow clearing. His eyes scanned them, sharp and cold. Simulation begins now, he announced. Scenario, you're deep behind hostile lines. Enemy patrols sweep the valley. You must reach an observation point without detection. Set up. Locate the target. Mark the shot. Extraction in 12 hours. Fail to evade, fail to locate, or fail to survive. You're done. Done, the word carried finality. Muttered finally, something real. His gaze cut to him. You'll regret those words if you're careless. They split into pairs, with Wells, with Emma alone. Why solo? She asked, pulse quickening. His reply was simple. Stillwater worked alone. Time you learned how that feels. The weight of it pressed harder than her pack. She slipped into the forest, rain slicking her hood, rifle tight against her shoulder. Every step demanded silence. Every branch threatened betrayal. She crawled when she had to, pressed belly to mud, breath slow and shallow. Hours passed. The forest became her enemy. Mosquitoes bit through sleeves. Mud soaked through boots. Her stomach growled. But worse than all of it was the exhaustion clawing at her. Twice, she almost nodded off in the brush, only to jolt awake at phantom footsteps. Then came the real ones. Voices, harsh male, not English. Emma froze, lowering herself into wet leaves. Through her scope, she spotted them, role players, not real hostiles, but convincing enough in camouflage and rifles. A patrol of 3 swept the trail below. Her breath slowed, heart pounded. She counted their steps, timed their pauses. One stopped, turned. His gaze swept dangerously close to her position. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Seconds stretched into years. Finally, the man turned away. The patrol disappeared down the trail. Emma exhaled, trembling. Her body begged to rest, but she pressed on. By dawn, she reached the ridge had marked. The valley opened wide below, mist rising, the target, a radio tower mock-up, barely visible in the distance. She set up her rifle, adjusted the scope. Her vision blurred. Fatigue pulled at her. Twice she blinked, hard, fighting sleep that clawed at her like drowning water. Her grandfather's voice whispered in memory, "Patience is a sniper's currency, but exhaustion will rob you blind." She steadied herself, watched the tower through wavering glass, waited for the right moment. Then footsteps again. Too close. Emma swiveled, rifle angled low. Emerged from the tree line, his own rifle slung, face set in irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" she whispered harshly. He smirked, twisted his ankle. "He's out. I took over. Figured I'd see if you'd even make it this far." Emma clenched her jaw. "This is my assignment." "Relax, it's an exercise. Doesn't matter who marks the target first, just matters who can." He dropped beside her, setting up. She bristled but didn't argue. Time was running thin. They both aligned scopes on the tower. Fired first, a blank training round, the signal shot. But it struck wide. He cursed under his breath, adjusted. Emma's turn. She studied the mist, the wind curling off the valley walls, the subtle shift of leaves on the opposite ridge. She ignored the roar of fatigue in her veins, ignored the hunger, the ache, the weight of beside her. She listened for the whisper. Exhaled. Fired. The signal round struck the target dead center. The clang echoed faintly across the valley. Jaw tightened, his glare burned into her. Lucky shot. Emma didn't look at him. She kept her eye on the scope, watching the valley, heart steady. "Not luck," she murmured, listening. The extraction came hours later. A chopper thumped low through mist, their signal smoke trailing upward. Exhausted, soaked, and aching, Emma climbed aboard with the others. Was waiting at base. His eyes scanned each of them, unreadable. And Wells had made it, hobbled in, ankle-wrapped, pride intact, was silent, his failure raw. Emma stood at the end of the line, mud-streaked, trembling with fatigue. His gaze lingered on her. For a moment his jaw tightened, as if hiding something. Finally he spoke. "Some of you broke, some of you bent. You bent, but you listened, that's the difference." Emma's chest ached, not from exhaustion this time, but from something warmer. For the first time since arriving at Prairie Fire, she felt she hadn't just survived. She had belonged. Why did the street feel too real? Emma crouched behind the shattered frame of a window, rifle balanced against the sill. The training complex had been transformed into a mock village, concrete walls, narrow alleys, doorways painted black to simulate shadow. It was supposed to be controlled, safe, just another exercise in Prairie Fire's relentless grind. But the air felt different tonight, heavy, charged. His voice crackled in her earpiece. "Scenario begins now. Hostile cell entrenched in the village. Intel indicates a high-value target inside. You'll move in pairs, neutralize threats, secure rooftop overwatch." Emma checked her comms. No partner's voice answered. added almost as an afterthought, "You're with." Her stomach dropped. Of course. Across the square, emerged from the shadows, rifle slung, eyes already set in a glare. He didn't bother hiding his irritation. "Guess they think I need dead weight," he muttered, falling into step beside her. Emma bit back a reply. She knew better than to waste breath on him. They advanced through the narrow street, boots crunching gravel, and Wells flanked left, and another trainee took right. Their movements were precise, practiced, but Emma could feel tension beside her, sharp, restless, like a coiled spring waiting to snap. At the first intersection, a training role player dressed in hostile fatigues popped from cover, firing blanks. Reacted fast, too fast, rushing forward and dropping the target with 2 clean shots. "Clear," he barked, chest heaving. Emma frowned. "You broke formation. We were supposed to cover angles." Shot her a glare. "We're still alive, aren't we? Don't lecture me." Before she could answer, his voice cut in hard. "Stay disciplined. This isn't about kills, it's about control." Muttered something under his breath, but pulled back into formation. They cleared 2 more buildings, tension thick between them. Emma tried to focus, reading wind drifting through broken doorways, the faint sound of movement above. She called it out once, warning of a rooftop shooter before he even spotted it. His grudging nod was the only acknowledgement. But when they reached the central square, everything collapsed. 3 role players opened fire from an upper balcony. Blanks rattled like thunder. Emma ducked behind a stone wall, heart hammering, surged forward, reckless, exposed. "Cover me," he shouted. "Wait." Too late, he broke into the open. Emma bit down panic, leaned from cover, fired 2 clean shots, dropping the mock hostiles before they could eliminate. He froze mid-stride, realization flickering across his face. She had just saved him. But he didn't thank her. Instead, when they regrouped inside the next building, he spun on her. "You think you're hot shit, don't you? Just because of that scope, just because of Stillwater." Emma's voice was steady, though her pulse roared. "I don't care about names. I'm here to do the job. You almost got yourself killed out there." Jaw flexed, he stepped closer, breath sharp. "You think you belong here. You're a fraud, riding your grandfather's ghost." Before Emma could respond, his voice thundered through comms. "Cut the chatter, rooftop, now." They climbed the stairwell in silence, tension simmering. Emma's hands shook as she gripped the rifle, not from fear of the exercise but from fury. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him he was wrong. But then they reached the roof. And everything changed. The rooftop was slick with rain. Wind whipped hard, carrying mist across their vision. The valley below stretched wide, and in it movement, shapes slipping between shadows. More role players. No, too many, too fast. Emma froze. "Are those?" Her earpiece crackled, his voice suddenly tight. "All units, halt exercise. Repeat, halt. We've got an intrusion on the perimeter." Real intruders. Stiffened, his earlier bravado drained from his face. Emma's pulse spiked, but her hands steadied on the rifle. She adjusted her scope, breath slowing. Through the glass she saw them clearly now, 4 armed men in mismatched fatigues, weapons not painted for training. Their movements sharp, predatory. Not role players, not part of the exercise. "Hostiles," Emma whispered into comms. 4 contacts, valley entrance moving toward compound. The channel erupted, barking orders, calling positions, Wells cursing under his breath. Chaos churned in their ears. But Emma focused. Her world narrowed to the glass, the wind, the drift of mist curling off trees. Crouched beside her, pale, rifle trembling slightly. For once, no insults, just fear. Emma's chest rose and fell in calm rhythm. She remembered words, listened for the whisper beneath the noise. The whisper told her wind was shifting left. The whisper told her the lead intruder carried heavier gear, radio equipment. The whisper told her she had one chance. She adjusted, exhaled, squeezed. The rifle cracked. The intruder dropped. The others scattered, shouting. Blinked at her, stunned. Emma didn't flinch. She chambered another round, tracked movement through mist, fired again. Another hostile fell. His voice snapped through comms. Hold fire, reinforcements inbound. Keep eyes only. Emma froze, breath tight, forcing herself to obey. The remaining hostiles melted into the tree line, slipping from view just as a quick reaction force stormed the valley below. Shouts, boots, engines. Then silence. Minutes stretched. Finally, his voice came low, controlled. Exercise suspended. All trainees returned to base. Emma lowered her rifle, heart still hammering. Sat beside her, silent, pale. On the walk back, no one spoke. Back at the compound, stood waiting. His eyes swept them all, lingering on Emma. What happened tonight was not planned, he said, voice grave. We were breached, not by actors, by men with real weapons, engaged, neutralized too. Emma's chest tight. This wasn't pride, it wasn't victory, it was weight. His gaze sharpened. Let this be clear. Prairie fire isn't theory. The skills you're building aren't for games. They're for moments exactly like tonight, when no one expects it, when no one else can act. He dismissed them. In the barracks that night, Emma sat on her bunk, scope in her lap, hands trembling now that adrenaline had faded. She thought of the men in the valley, real men, real blood. Her first kills. Sat across the room, silent, for once no smirk, no challenge, just eyes that wouldn't meet hers. Passed by, pausing at Emma's bunk, her voice was soft. You kept your head, a lot of people wouldn't have. Emma nodded faintly, unable to speak. When she finally lay down, staring at the ceiling, her grandfather's words returned once more. It's never the tool, it's the hand that knows it. She had thought she understood. But tonight she realized, knowing it came with a price. And the price was heavy. Why did the silence feel louder than gunfire? Emma sat alone in the dim barracks, the scope resting in her lap, its brass edges glinting faintly in the low light. The others slept, or at least pretended to. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, the men in the valley. Not role players, not simulations. Real men, real blood. Her shots had been clean, her aim precise. She had done what she was trained to do. So why did her chest feel like it was caving in? Her grandfather's note echoed in her head. You will be given a choice. Whatever you decide, I am proud of you. But had she really chosen? When the moment came, there had been no choice. Only the rifle, only the scope, only her finger pulling the trigger before thought could catch up. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal, whispering to herself, I didn't want this. The next morning's voice cut through the mess hall like a blade, eyes front. The recruits froze mid-bite, stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back, expression grim. Last night proved what I've told you since day one. Out here, lines blur, training becomes real. If you can't live with that, walk away now. No shame, no punishment. But if you stay, you'd better understand this program isn't theory, it's blood. Silence followed, no one moved. His eyes scanned the group. His gaze lingered on Emma. He didn't call her name, but the weight in his stare said enough. I know what you carry. Sat across the table. For once, no smirk, no taunt. His eyes flicked to Emma, then down to his tray. Something in him had shifted. Later that day, as they prepped for another range session, approached her. His voice was low, stripped of arrogance. You saved me last night. Emma looked at him, wary. I did my job. He shook his head. No, you did more than that. I froze. You didn't. If you hadn't, he stopped, jaw tightening. I was wrong about you. Emma studied him, unsure if it was apology or guilt. Maybe both. Added softer, I won't forget it. Then he walked away. It was the first time. He hadn't looked at her like an enemy. But Emma couldn't accept his words, not fully. Because the truth was, she hadn't been fearless. She had been terrified. She had acted because if she hadn't, people would have died, including him. And now she had to live with the fact that two others hadn't walked away. That evening gathered them at the far edge of the range. His tone was flat, businesslike, but his eyes carried challenge. 1,500 meters, he said, pointing to a steel silhouette barely visible against the distant ridge. Most of you have tagged it once by now. Today, you'll stretch farther. He turned, pointing to a target beyond the ridge almost swallowed by haze. 2,000 meters, 1.25 miles. You'll fire from elevated position. Mirage is heavy, winds inconsistent. No tech, no computers, just instinct. Stillwater made this shot once. Let's see if any of you can come close. A ripple of unease passed through the group. 2,000 meters was the stuff of myth. Stepped up first, his breathing steady, his posture firm. He fired, missed, adjusted, fired again. The round struck dirt short of the target. He cursed, jaw tight, but refused to look at anyone. Tried next. Her discipline showed, every adjustment calculated, every breath controlled. She landed one round near the edge, enough for to nod faintly. Wells missed entirely. Calculations gave him better grouping, but none on target. Then it was Emma's turn. She lay prone, the rifle steady against her shoulder, the old scope pressed to her eye. The world narrowed to a shimmer of heat, a whisper of wind twisting across the valley, a target barely visible at the edge of sight. Crouched beside her, offering numbers. Wind 5 from 2 o'clock. Elevation drop significant. Try 17 clicks. Emma lifted a hand, silencing him. Not this time. She breathed, watched, waited. The dust carried faint spirals in the valley. Birds shifted flight just slightly east. The grass on the ridge swayed in a rhythm almost too subtle to see. She remembered words, don't let it shout, hear the whisper. Her finger tightened. The rifle cracked. A long pause, then a faint metallic ping. Direct hit. The silence that followed was absolute. His lips pressed into something close to a smile, just for a second, then it was gone. That's Stillwater's blood, he said quietly. But make no mistake, that was you, not him. Emma's chest swelled with something she couldn't name. Not pride, not relief, something heavier. Approached afterward, shaking his head almost in disbelief. 2,000 meters, first try. He gave a short, dry laugh. I hate to admit it, but damn. Emma met his gaze. For the first time, no hostility passed between them, only respect. Fragile, uneasy, but real. That night sat with Emma by the barracks fire pit, flames flickering against tired faces. You know what's said about blood? Asked. Emma nodded. He's right, but it cuts both ways. Your gift, it'll save people, but it'll also mark you. Once they know what you can do, they'll keep sending you, again and again, until you've got nothing left to give. Emma stared into the fire, his words burning as hot as the flames. She wondered if her grandfather had felt the same. If Stillwater had lain awake nights, haunted not by the shots he missed, but by the ones he hadn't. When she finally crawled into her bunk, she pressed the scope to her chest, whispering to herself, I don't want to become him, but maybe I already am. And for the first time, the thought didn't just scare her. It broke her. Why was the helicopter so quiet? Emma sat strapped into her seat, the thump of rotors muffled by her headset. Night swallowed the horizon, only faint glimmers of moonlight brushing the jagged peaks below. Her rifle rested across her lap, scope secured, hands steady, or at least they looked steady. Inside, her chest carried the same heaviness it had since that night on the rooftop. This was no exercise, no simulation. Prairie Fire was deploying for real. His voice had been blunt in briefing. Target is a high-value insurgent commander coordinating cross-border raids. You'll establish Overwatch. You'll get one shot. Clean, silent, final. Anything less and a lot of people die. Emma's throat had tightened at the words. She had nodded anyway. Now in the dim red glow of the cabin, she glanced at her team. Expression calm, almost serene. Wells jaw tight, hands folded as if in prayer. Eyes darting, rehearsing calculations silently. Staring at nothing, face unreadable. When his gaze shifted to Emma, it lingered. No mockery, no rivalry, only something she hadn't seen in him before. Trust. The helicopter banked, a light tap on her shoulder, time. They disembarked onto the ridge. Cold night air bit at their cheeks. Silence pressed heavy, broken only by boots on stone and the click of gear settling into place. Crouched low, voice barely above a whisper. Wells' perimeter, spotter support, secondary rifle. His eyes met hers. Primary. The word landed like weight across her shoulders. She knew what it meant. She was the one who would pull the trigger. They moved like shadows across the ridge, setting into position. Below stretched a valley village, mud walls, faint lantern glow, the occasional barking of a dog. In the largest structure, their target moved. Emma adjusted her scope, breath steady. Through the glass, the man came into view, surrounded by guards but visible through an open window. She tracked his movements, waited. Whispered wind speeds, murmured patrol patterns. Silence pressed like an anchor. Emma ignored it all. She listened for the whisper. Branches swayed in rhythm with unseen currents. Dust curled faint across rooftops. The mirage shimmered faint even in moonlight. Her chest rose, fell. She squeezed. The rifle cracked, thunder muted by suppressor. Through her scope she saw it, the man crumpling, silent, final. Target down. The village stirred, shouts rising, guards rushed. Lights flickered on, but it was too late. The shot had spoken. His voice came low, sharp, move. They exfiltrated fast, slipping back through darkness, every nerve alive with the rush of survival. The helicopter swallowed them into its belly. The valley shrank below until it was nothing but shadow again. Inside the cabin, no one spoke, closed her eyes. Wells leaned back, drained, scribbled notes, shaking slightly, stared at Emma. Finally, he said it. Perfect shot. Emma didn't answer. She just held the scope, heart hammering. When they landed at base, dismissed the others. Only Emma remained. He stood across from her, arms folded, eyes unreadable. You carried Stillwater's name here, he said, but you've proven you don't need it. Tonight wasn't his legacy, it was yours. Emma swallowed, voice rough. Then why doesn't it feel like victory? His eyes softened just barely. Because it never does. You'll learn that carrying the shot is heavier than pulling it. But that weight, it means you still have a soul. Don't lose that, most men do. He turned, leaving her in silence. Later, alone in her bunk, Emma unfolded her grandfather's note again. Her fingers traced the words until they blurred with tears. Whatever you decide, I am proud of you. She had decided, not by choice, not by accident, but because the world had demanded it. She was a sniper now, not a trainee, not a granddaughter living in shadows. But herself. Emma. She placed the scope back in its case, locking it gently. Then she lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside her window. It carried whispers she could almost understand. Not about distance, not about targets. About weight, about silence, about carrying dignity without the need to explain. The world would never know the shot she made. Never know the girl mocked for a rusted scope, who proved that ghosts and bloodlines were less powerful than quiet determination. But she knew. And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.